Okay, good morning. 6th of the month. Gadol Torah shemevi refuah l'kol chai. Great is Torah because it brings healing to all living things. Who needs a refuah?
Baruch Benjamin ben Rachel Blima, Yehuda Skolta Basiliza Hana, Chaim Yaakov Zeb ben Tzara, Yosef ben Lior, Shoshana Basana, Gary Robertson of George, Yaakov Shal ben Hanamiriam, Yehudit Geula Bas Rahalea, and Yehudis Bas Keli.
Refuah shlema b'koreh mamash.
Amen.
Rav Yitzchak Feibish ben Braina Malka. Refuah shlema. Okay, here we go. Hayom Yom for the 6th. 6th of Cheshvan. When the Alter Rebbe wished to bless Rabbi Kusil Liplia with wealth, he was very wealthy and a very big chassid of the Alter Rebbe. The latter said he did not, he got the bracha, but he said he did not want wealth to distract him from studying Chassidus and from his involvement with Avodah. When the Rebbe wished to bless him with longevity, his answer was, but not, in parentheses, as peasant years. Peasant, in other words, well, you'll say peasant years. Peasant years means to him, and what he meant to say to the Alter, what he's saying to the Alter Rebbe, I don't want to be like men that have eyes but do not see, who have ears but do not hear, who do not perceive godliness, nor do they hear godliness. In other words, he wanted a blessing. It's interesting, right, in negotiating with the Alter Rebbe for the bracha, but he wanted a blessing that godliness and his service of God and godliness should be the reason for his long life. Okay. Lessons in Tanya. Continuing our story of unpacking, unwinding the real meaning of things which were not understood in the Zohar that we began 3 days ago. So this is beginning, we're on the second piece of this, on page 127 in Lessons in Tanya. And on page, in the Kuti Amurim, page Kuf Mem Gimel, from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up. Okay, just to review, one thing that the Zohar said is that the Zohar is called the tree of life, and it seemed that in that way he was compartmentalizing the rest of Torah into the Torah which is the knowledge of good and evil. 2 trees, right? Eitz Chaim, which is, of course, the title of one of the big Kabbalah works of Moshe Cordovero, the Eitz Chaim, and then Eitz Tov Gvara, the tree of good and evil. Yesterday, the Alter Rebbe said we can't take that as a simple meaning. One, because the Torah itself is called, it's a Eitz Chaim Hi L'Machazichim Bo. The entire Torah is called a tree of life to those who literally grow strong or cling to it in a strong way. So he put that on the table, that we can't understand that simply. And he's now going to put the second piece on the table, which is that in the future, it says that the Talmidei Chachamim will no longer eat from the tree of good and evil, which tree of good and evil means the laws of what's permissible and what's not permissible. The simple, straightforward implication, which the Alter Rebbe says cannot be true, is that we will no longer, in the time of the redemption, we'll no longer need to learn what's kosher and what's not kosher. That's the law of good and evil. Kosher is good and evil is not kosher. He says, and he says today's Tanya, that cannot be the case either. And by the way, if you're impatient a bit with this, which sometimes I am, This is the second piece, and tomorrow he'll begin to explain how we should be understanding these things. But we have today to understand how we shouldn't be understanding this second piece. Okay, and that's where he begins. He says it's a really wondrous thing, a very wondrous thing. How is it possible that that in the times of Mashiach, that we're not going to have to know? How is it possible that in the time of Mashiach we're not going to have to know the laws of what's forbidden and what's permissible, what's tuma and what's tahara? Why? Because he gives an example. How are we going to slaughter the korbanos, right? The temple is going to be really active, bringing korbanos, and those animals need to be slaughtered. And they need to be slaughtered in a way that the Torah prescribes it, which is in the laws of Isser V'Heter. There's a permissible way to slaughter an animal, and there's a forbidden way to slaughter the animal. And we're going to have to know that. And we're going to have to know it because then we're going to have to know it even more so because the number of korbanos and the offerings is continual every day. And also we have to know about ordinary slaughtering. Chulin, there's kodshim, that's animals which are slaughtered for kaddish, for the Beis HaMikdash kaddish, and there's chulin, which is just slaughtered for ordinary eating. How are we going to have kosher and kosher shchita if we don't know the laws of these three? These are three parts of shchita. Drisa is pressing on the knife when you in a certain way. V'chalada is directing the knife, and shehoya is pushing, or is the pauses. If you make a pause, it depends. But if you make a pause and interrupt it, then the shechita is no good, and therefore the animal can't be eaten. We're going to have to know those things in the future, in the time of Mashiach, because we're going to still keep kosher. It's not that, I don't know if it would even cross your mind, but it has crossed someone's mind, people's mind, that in the time of Mashiach, all that will be gone. Since the clippers have been eradicated, purified, etc., we will no longer need the laws of what's permissible and what's not permissible. But that's not the case. But we're going to know how and he's back to shchita, how to do these things. Poislim, which if you don't do them, the shchita is posel. Poislim hashchita, which posels the shchita. Also, it throws in also pegimas hasachin. You have to know how exactly to sharpen the knife so there's not one blemish in the knife. And he goes on to another topic, which is what we're going to have to know and will continue to know in the times of Mashiach. When a person gives birth according to in a natural way, yeah, and would a person come to think that we're not going to have to know these things? That things will be created perfect without any need to abide by the laws which say this is how you're going to have to behave with these things. You're going to have to behave with these things in a certain way. Things are not going to be born. An animal, well, it's kind of silly to say, but an animal won't be born shechted. Will have to be shechted. There's still a shoichet involved. And a shoichet involved is going to have to know the laws. There's many other kinds of halachas about animals. Chelev, what's good, what's kosher fat, what fat needs to be discarded, the dam and blood, the shar isurim, and all other kinds of isurim. So that's the end of one type of Isser V'Heter, which is still going to have to be known. He moves to another one. V'gam tumas hames, when a person dies, there will still be tumas hames, the impurity of the death. You're going to have to know that. Could it conceive, as is written, a pasuk in Yeshayahu, it says, "Anar ben me'ah shana umes." A person may live longer, up to 100 years, but still there will be death. This is before Tchias HaMesim, right? This is in the time of Yemei Mashiach. And so you need to going to know the laws of ritual purity of the body and burial and all those things. Begam tumas yeledus, and also the tuma, the impurity that accrues at birth. Sort of like that you're going to have to know. Because see, as is written, it's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. The pasuk says, "Hora ledes yachtov." It says, even a pregnant woman who gives birth, yachtov, will be brought together with us into the Holy Land. So there will be pregnancy, there will be birth, there will be, and those things which are associated, mitzvah mila and things like that, and the purity and the, now before that, the ritual impurity in the mikveh. All of those things are going to pertain. They are not going to be nullified at the time of Mashiach. As I said, it might have risen up, and it could rise up into your mind. But in the time of Mashiach, if all the birurim have been done, then the Torah is going to be the Torah, the most of which most body of Torah is the halachas, will all be disappearing, and all we'll do is sit around and learn Kabbalah. He says, absolutely not. That's not the case. There's no opinion like that. That can't be what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai meant when he says that in the future, the dominant will be the tree of life and not the tree of good and evil. He goes one more further. Im toiled isha bechol yom nevia achas. Also, one thing that's also brought amongst to describe Yemei Mashiach, just like people will live longer, there will be a miracle, which is discussed, and there's a long discussion in Lessons in Tanya of Rashi versus the Arizal and others, exactly what this means. What it says is that a woman will give birth to many children from one intimacy. Afal b'ched, nevertheless, din isir v'heter. He says, summing this piece up a bit, all the laws of what's prohibited, isir, and what's tuma, loy yishtana, they won't change. The Alter Rebbe says, "Vein laharet b'davar hapashet u'mefursam habefi kol hashas." And there's no, I don't have to speak about this any longer, because this is something that's expressed and publicized and turned over and over again and discussed in the entirety of the Shas, which is the Gemara, and the Mishnayos, and the Gemoras, or Midrashim. The Porach Hilchos of the Mashiach, that they ask in the Gemara in a number of places, will halacha be any different in the time of Mashiach? Where the implication is, the answer is no. Halacha will be standing. In fact, halacha will be standing, but Eliyahu will be present to resolve all questions, but there will be questions. And similarly, it says, this particular difficulty in the Torah, in the future, Eliyahu will come and resolve and interpret it, and giving us an understanding that in the future there will be the need to clarify, birur halacha, clarifying halacha will still exist. The Hedoni movement also is not understood much because of it's written another thing that the Zohar said, that the Talmidic Chachamim will no longer have to live from the produce and the fields that are brought to them from the Amei Ha'oretz, the people of the earth, who eat things which are prohibited. So this is not understood. Mashakasim back inside. The lay is farnus in Talmud Chachamim Amei Ha'oretz. It's not understood that which it says in the Zohar, that the Talmud Chachamim will no longer be sustained by the simple people who don't know the difference and who don't practice the difference between what's permissible and what's not permissible. He said the Zohar says the Talmud Chachamim will not be sustained by no longer will they be sustained by the Erev Rab, the oichlin pasul, that they eat things which are pasul or tumah, the usher or forbidden, as for shalom. Because if you take a look at what was going on at that time, remember the Zohar, if you recall, the Zohar is written by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai when he was in the cave escaping the Romans, at the same time that the Gemara is being elucidated and brought out and and at length all of the explanations of the written Torah into the oral Torah. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is one of the huge Tanoim of the Mishnah. And we went through this, how most of his time, in fact, he who wrote the Zohar, was spent studying the laws of Issa v'Heter, forbidden and permissible, or Chiyuv and Potter, whether a person is guilty or innocent. And he himself was spending most of his time on that. In fact, Shehari Talmidei Chachamim Shebazan Bayesheni, the Talmidei Chachamim, the great wise ones who lived in the time of the Second Temple, they were not getting their life, their support from Amei Ha'oretz, the Ochlim Posel. They were not eating food that was grown by the men of the people of the field who ate posel, things which were posel and iser, God forbid. In fact, the Talmidei Chachamim, they had sodes v'karmim, they had ke'amei ha'oretz, they had fields and vineyards like the simple people. And nevertheless, in other words, they had fields, they cultivated, but they themselves were very careful about Isser v'Heter, because those laws were not suspended at the time that the Zohar was written, even though there's a line which we have from the Zohar which makes it appear, and the Alter Rebbe is saying it can't be taken at face value, that this whole Indian of Isser v'Heter, forbiddenness and permissibility, went away. It can't be. Because even the time of that time, the Talmidei Chachamim had fields and vineyards, like the simple people. But nevertheless, they still occupied themselves with the laws of what was forbidden, what's permissible, what was Tuma v'Tahara, Kol Hazugais, all the pairs. Now the pairs are the Haverim. In the Zohar, there are it's a very interesting, I have to confess, I haven't learned lots of Zohar. Mainly the Zohar that I've learned is references in Chassidus, which I've looked up. I think that's pretty much all of the Zohar that I've learned. But you see in the Zohar, there's a certain structure. It's a dialogue amongst Haverim, amongst pairs of people. And these are the pairs, the Zugim, as he says, the Zugos, the pairs in the Zohar. So, Kol hazugais shehoya b'yamei ba'yesheni, all these pairs which existed at the time of the Second Temple, v'hamidoi talmidim, and they, what did they do? They stood up many students, talmidim, fine b'ravavis, in the thousands and the tens of thousands. And what did those students learn? What did they deal with all day? Limud hanister b'hester? No. They did not learn all day the hidden secrets of the Torah in the Zohar. They learned, as you open up a Kamorah, they learned further explications of trying to get to the truth of what is being said about a particular situation in kosher or finance or behavior. That's what they were involved in. So on these points, as well as the ones we expressed yesterday, you can't take the language of the Zohar straight. You're going to have to understand it in a different way. And that's what we will begin tomorrow. All right. Any questions, comments on that? It's interesting because, we haven't learned, we're not delving yet into the Chassidus of this, right? We're not delving into the answers. So we've been just kind of straightforwardly putting on the table situations which contradict the simple understanding of the Zohar. So I think we've pretty all got that. And then tomorrow we'll start delving into behind the scenes. What does the language of the Zohar really mean? And if there are no questions or comments, we'll adjourn until tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.